Handover hell. Today's episode is all about handovers, what you need to know, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and how to lock in a successful handover so that your children are stress-free and you are stress-free. Thanks for coming again today, Mum.
Hey, Laura. Hello, everyone.
So, Mum, this is a question we get asked a lot, and we haven't actually broached it yet, and we've done 165 episodes. So it's interesting that we've waited this long to broach it. But today, with the format we're going to follow, just in case people would like to get to the bit that they're interested in, we're going to talk about why do you need to specify handovers? And then we're going to go into what types of handovers there are, what are your options, how do you lock it in, and how do you future-proof it, which is really important. But also, more importantly, how do you make it stress-free for the kids and stress-free for yourself? And we're going to talk about some handover fails that we've heard about from members and listeners who've written in, and to make sure you avoid those, and also talk about how handover goes hand in hand with the different divorce personality types: manipulative, controlling, amicable, avoidant, and high conflict.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
The first question that everybody wants to know, Mum, why do people need to bother specifying a particular handover location? What's the point?
Well, for one, it's certainty for you both, obviously. The second thing is that there can be no misunderstanding about when the kids were supposed to be handed over from one person to another. And therefore, if they bring a contravention in the future, they can clearly say it was supposed to be on this date at this time and it hasn't happened.
Right.
But no wiggle room.
So it's a legal reason. If you don't have a specific handover, and some people right at the beginning of their separation, they haven't nutted this out. And like you've talked about many times before in the beginning stages, they just kind of muddle through it and kind of figure out as they go along. But it soon becomes pretty clear to pretty much everyone that they need some sort of systematic pattern or something. So you do really need to have handover specified and locked down. What are the different types of handover that people can do, Mum? Because I didn't realise there were so many different options of handovers.
Yeah. So I guess it's because the family court spent nigh on 50 years encountering these difficulties, and I've watched the whole thing evolve. And so the types of orders can be like you each see each other and hand the children over from one parent to another, so that involves both of you in one place. It could be that almost all of the handovers are at schools or at their daycare, which also is less stress, they say, for the kids. If there's a bit of tension between the families, kids can pick up on it. So school has become a very popular one. Sometimes at someone else's house, if there's a neutral person. Some of the handovers, like where one person who's picking up the kids comes to the gate of the house and the other, or the front fence, and the other parents I remember this big description. They know the car was there. He'd toot the horn and then they'd open the door. The kids would walk out and then shut the door again. So I don't know if that was preferable for the kids than seeing their parents fighting. I suspect it was, but it would have been better if they could have done it better. There's all the Macca's handovers on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday. But the last kind is supervised, where you don't want to be in the vicinity of the other person. And maybe they're okay to take the children. They just can't control themselves when you're there, or you've brought your new girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever. So changeovers can happen at contact centres.
Just to clarify to anyone who doesn't know what a contact centre is, what is a contact centre?
So a contact centre is a service really that's been set up so that children can see their parent if there is some suggestion that the parent is not safe to take them away with them or have them at their home. So it's a way for the kids to still keep a little bit of contact with the parent in a safe environment that's supervised by usually social workers or psychologists.
So contact centres can do handovers, so you can go and do the handover at the contact centre.
Yes. So what would happen is you would go half an hour before the handover time or quarter of an hour before, drop the children off and then drive away. And then the other person arrives at the contact centre, collects the children, and you're long gone, you know.
Okay. So you've said school, home, sometimes, you know, Macca's or a takeaway place that's going to be there forever, or a contact centre.
Yeah.
The next part of it is who does the handovers? Does there have to be a particular person, or can it be anyone?
Well, it just depends on what type of separation you've got going on. You know, if you've got a bit of a fighty kind of separation, a conflictual one, you might want to specify that it's you or your nominee who can hand the kids over, because these orders will go for, I don't know, maybe up to 15 years. And you don't want to be the only person that can ever drop them off or pick them up. So sometimes they'll specify that there's or nominee, or it may be that it is a kind of work to rule and it's both parents each time. Yep.
So, and we are going to talk about high conflict at the end, but that's a very valid point. High conflict and manipulative controlling, we have heard of them demanding that it must be only the parent or the ex that does it, and they do it so that they can see the ex, or they've got some control over the ex, or they don't like the new girlfriend, or they don't like the new boyfriend, and all of that. Very, very explosive. And so it is so important to lock this stuff in and do it well. So we're going to talk about future-proofing your plan. Yeah. So it's good to specify who, if you do think your ex is going to be painful, which they might not be yet, it's always good to say me or a nominated other person. And then with the how, Mum, we talked about location, but how? So I know it sounds so silly to someone who potentially hasn't split with their partner yet, or they've never done a handover, but why would you need to mention how? But is there some, like you said, where they just open the door and the kids walk out and they shut the door? Are there other things that need to be done? Like, what about the school bags? Like, if you're not picking them up from school, do the kids have to carry the bags? Like, does it specify you have to stay in the car? Like, what are all these different other options for how?
Well, the how can be anything that seems to fit the case in the best interests of the children. So years and years ago, you would send a packed bag with a child to the other parent, because if they were mainly at one place, they're going to the other place for every second weekend, you'd pack clothes for them. And then that would have made pickups from school quite awkward, because there'd be this second bag. And we may well be coming to that again, I think, in the future. So, but normally, like over the last 17 years, I'd say, the children get collected from school. It's like there are other parents picking them up from school, and there's no sort of conflict. As for the school bags and stuff, we're really counting on the kids to remember their recorder or their music or whatever. We're also counting on the other parent, to keep up to date with what assignments need to be done and so forth. So they may be having quite a lot to carry to go to the other parent of an afternoon. But they seem to manage. Sometimes you have duplicates of things at each house, but that's not helpful for a child that is forgetful, because they might end up leaving both of them at the other person's place.
Yeah. And look, I think that's another discussion for our co-parenting episodes, dealing with all that stuff. And I know we have on it a fair bit in some of our Christmas episodes as well. But let's get into future-proofing. Now, it is something that people don't think of, but how do you future-proof a handover plan?
Well, it's really hard to get your head around it. If you've got a 3-year-old, it's hard to imagine them at high school. But the arrangements for a 3-year-old will be different. So you might have something in there about nappy bags and toilet training and picking them up from daycare, dropping off from daycare. So the way that you future-proof is to look ahead, crystal ball gaze, assume things are going to go pretty well the same as they are now. And then you might have to say, for instance, that the parent who's commencing their time collect the child from either the preschool, the daycare, the preschool, the school, or the school that they are attending at the time. That's one way of doing it. Where you might have to, in a McDonald's changeover, for instance, one of the things that a lot of people do if there's too much tension is one person puts the toddler or young person in the play area, and the other person then waits for them to stop playing and takes them out. So, but that wouldn't be necessary as the kids got older.
trying to get a teenager to play in the McDonald's playground might be tricky. So what you're saying is basically to future-proof. So if you've got babies or toddlers right now and you lock down a handover, you've got to think, okay, especially if you've got a manipulative controlling, you do not want to have to then drive to the daycare that they used to go to 5 years ago to do handover. Do you ever get people going to court fighting over this if they've got orders, Mum?
Oh, yes. One case, and it was before these amendments, but was reported that the orders said that the changeover would happen at McDonald's at a certain place. And that McDonald's closed down. And the parent who was supposed to be giving the child over said, well, I can't do it. There's no McDonald's there. And the judge pointed out there was a Hungry Jack's across the road, but he had used it technically to not hand over the children. So, yes, I've had that. Anyone coming to me with that sort of thing would have got pretty well a short shrift. And the court, it will be very unhappy with anyone who is looking for loopholes. This is stressful for the kids if the parents are going, oh, well, he's not there or she's not coming. So, yeah, but I have had cases like that, Laura, or where people have parked at the wrong entrance to a shopping centre or the wrong side of a cricket ground. It's just ludicrous. And the court gets really upset.
So for future-proofing your handover, I want anyone who's watching this today to sit down and go, okay, what ages and stages do I need to have a handover plan for? Thinking about, am I going to move house? Am I going to be in a different location? Are my children going to change schools? Are they going to have part-time jobs? Like all of this needs to come into play. What are their extracurricular activities? Will they change? And try and create wording that makes sure handover cannot be manipulative.
I have had a number of cases where a particular fast food store in a particular suburb was named as changeover. Both parents had moved away. They couldn't agree on moving the changeover spot. And so it moved closer to one person and further away from the other. And there was an absolute fight over this changeover thing. So one way of doing it is that you talk about, instead of, I'm sorry to pick on McDonald's, but let's see in Aspley or whatever, you might say at the KFC that is approximately a midway point between the parents' residence from time to time. And then you'd have to say in there, but provided neither of them move more than a K away, because you could end up with one person in Cairns, one person in Rockhampton, and the halfway point is hours and hours away.
It's super bad. And I think another future-proofing, it's important, is if one of the parents, when we get this question a lot, one of the parents drops off. They don't want to pick the kids up anymore. They're not interested. And it was all for show, for court, or it was just the thing that they did, and now they're moving on with their lives.
Well, it's too hard,
You don't want to have a situation where you're sitting in a car with your children outside their house waiting for them to turn up to pick up their kids, or being stuck somewhere where, you really can't get the kids out of that situation without making them feel bad.
That's right. And that is one of the sad tragedies of children's lives in separation. The one thing you can't force is the other parent to spend time with the children. So where that's likely to happen or could happen, that's where your collection from home and the other person collects the child from your home and you collect the children from their home at the end. So that's the way that the court does it. Whoever wants the kids at a particular time is due to have they're the ones who go pick up or go and pick up. And then if a parent doesn't turn up, the kids are sort of not hanging around a Macca's looking for the car. They can get on with their day, and you can as well. And sometimes there's factored into orders that, if there's been 8 visits missed, then that's if you're doing a Macca's. If there've been 5 or 8 or whatever number of meetings that were missed, then you're off the hook and put in there that then the pickup place reverts to your house from time to time.
Right.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, from the house.
That's some things that you need to think about for future proofing, and everybody's situation is different because the kids have a million different things, So be anything that you need to think about, what's going to change, what's going to happen in the future. So, Mum, once you've future-proofed and thought about it all and thought about who, the where, the time, the day, how do you lock that kind of thing in? If you're not in court being told by a judge how handover is going to happen, how do you lock that in, and why is it a good idea?
Well, you lock it in by way of a parenting plan or maybe a consent order. And it's a good idea because even if at the moment you're rolling along quite well, when there's new partners on the scene or if one of you does something that upsets the other one, at least there's a black and white set down procedure to be followed so that the children get to see both parents. It's very important to lock it down. You could do consent orders. Parenting plans can be shorter, I guess, for shorter term.
So we've got a great episode called The 12 Agreements for a Parenting Plan, and that's a really great episode you can listen to and create a parenting plan and things that you need to think about that maybe you haven't thought of. I'll put that in the show note. We also talk about consent order. It's not rocket science. You can listen to that episode as well if you're interested in consent orders, but there are two ways of locking it in. If you can't agree though, Mum, you do end up trying to do it at mediation or sent in front of a judge. Is that right?
Yeah. Or if there's absolutely no agreement and there are no orders and there's no parenting plan in place, some people just maintain frosty silences and the children just don't go. So, and that may or may not be the best thing for the kids. So sometimes it's really hard to navigate a negotiation. If you've got someone who's friendly and amicable, you might not think you need to, but then they get a new partner or something happens. Yeah.
So I think it's important to say here to anyone listening about Mum always talks about, and I'll get you to elaborate on this, Mum, the start as you mean to go on. Because if you start doing this, the court looks at what you have been doing in the past. So can you explain why people really need to have a think about what it's going to be doing and the effects it will have on their future if they go to court?
Yeah. Okay. So the start as you mean to go on philosophy particularly applies with children. So if you're the person who doesn't have the children the majority of the time and you're wanting to spend time with them and then you realize there's like barriers being put up, like, oh, they're too sick to go or, oh, they've got music tonight. And if you're friendly and you go, okay, I understand, and then try and do it another night, you can set yourself up for being bullied by the other person as time goes by. So even if the children are unwell, you should be saying, I'm able to look after these kids. So I'll pick them up and tell me what medicine they're on and they can come and I'll take a load off you for it now. If you don't do it that way, you can find it very hard to break that pattern of one person just saying no and the other person going, oh, okay.
And then on the flip side of that, Mum, there's also the other issue of trying to force the kids on a parent who doesn't necessarily want them. And we come up across this a lot where people are saying, oh, I feel bad. I want to make sure I set this. And they really try to push the kids onto the other parent and try and make these things work. And it's lackluster effort and it's sad. And then they get a new partner and then all of a sudden they do want them. So can you talk about that trap that people can get stuck in as well?
Yeah, it is a trap, isn't it? For the children's point of view, it's important to know a court will never order kids to go to someone who doesn't want them at some point, because how can it be good for the kids if they're being forced on a parent? And so if you're in that position and you're trying to keep up the contact and they keep letting you down, then it might not be appropriate to keep forcing that contact if you haven't got orders. However, when a new partner comes on the scene, that is or with either parent, or someone gets engaged or married or the divorce goes through, that can ramp up the spite and anger. And then suddenly the person who didn't want them wants them all the time and casts your previous attempts as trying to have the child as you maliciously withholding the kids when it was absolutely the contrary. But they go, I haven't had them since April. Well, it doesn't matter because she didn't ask for them since April or it hasn't been available. So it is important to have things in writing and start as you mean to go on. And if the other person is not going to see the children, sort of document it a little bit, send an email saying, look, I noticed you didn't have them again this weekend. I was expecting you. We waited for 15, 20 minutes. that sort of thing. So you've got an ongoing narrative that when they try to rewrite history in the future in front of the judge, you've got the evidence. That's not what it was at all.
That's important to note. Good tips there. So, Mum, the most important thing about handover is the kids.
Of course.
How do we make handovers? And I know you're not a psychologist, but how do we make handovers good for the kids so they're not dreading them at every single time?
Yeah. And I mean, that it seems to be the family studies they've done and the court's view seems to be that parents in conflict at the same place at the same time as the children causes them so much angst. The kids dread it all day. If they're at school, it's upsetting for them at school because they're dreading what's going to happen that afternoon. So being matter of fact with the changeovers, I think changeovers at schools or daycare, the judges really rate that as a good thing because there's no crossing of the streams, as it were. So that's one way they do it. The other is having a neutral person do the changeovers for them. And there's a lot you can do. Like if it's your kids, you can be positive about the time. There's a difference between saying, well, you've got to have time with your father or, oh, you're going to daddy's tonight. That'll be fun. Or you're going to mummy's. I wonder what you'll do. You need to build it up. And it hasn't been as common recently, but in the old days, if you could bear to have photos of the other parent in their bedroom, and that sort of says a lot to kids.
And I think anybody who is watching this who has children, they know a transition of any type, there can be issues. And there is a phenomenon of the kids playing up just before or just after, or pretty much playing up in that stage because like when they're younger, they really can't cope with the whole drama and they don't understand it. And the mum might be upset, the dad might be upset. So the kids are just going to be like, I don't know. So there are a lot of things people do. I've seen some really great tips for transition to just have a routine for the child just before they leave yours if they're not being picked up at school or before they go that day, and a routine when they get there. So, you know, it kind of eases them into it, kind of like traditions. And I think that helps the routine and traditions, particularly if you've got a neurodivergent kid.
Yeah. I remember a client once who put me onto this idea and I thought it was absolutely lovely. So her kids were early school age. She would print out the month and put ladybird stickers on the days that they were going to their dads. So kids just look at it and go, oh, we're going to, so instead of like, oh, we're going to dad's this afternoon. I didn't know. It's instead they know in 2 nights we'll go to daddy's or in 1 night we're going to mummy's, and they can wait that long to see the other parent that they love. Yeah. And it's part of their routine. And especially, as you say, Laura, neurodivergent kids. They need to know.
And I guess another thing I think for parents to think about is when they do get older, they do have to remember so much, like their laptops, their cards, all these sort of things. If you can be responsible for packing it, I know it's counterintuitive because you're like, they need to learn, they've got to, but it's kind of your problem because teenagers that don't have separated kids don't have to deal with packing their bag every couple of weeks or every couple of days. So if you can help them with that or have a little reminder chart. So there are lots of things that people can do. And then also a pop parenting course, the Relationships Australia pop parenting course. And on YouTube, I'll put a link to it. They have some videos that show the effects of handover children. And they
can't hear those videos.
Actually interview children about it. And I think some parents thought that if they just didn't say anything and they looked down and they did handover, gave the bag and then went to their car, then there's no fighting. That's great. I haven't hurt the kids. But then these interviews with these children, basically the kids are saying, Mum didn't say a word, Dad didn't say a word, I felt terrible. And so I think it's really good to go and listen to some of those just to get your head around what your child might be thinking and how your child can cope well if you're interested.
I think that some of those kids, when they're older, they described that they could cut the air with the knife. It was so intense. And there's lots of ways to like that a child will look to you to see if you're disapproving of what they're doing. So they may think you're disapproving of them going to the other parent, especially if your demeanour changes immediately. And it's so hard if you've been through a lot with the parent. It's so hard. But I think the kids, now that they're starting to speak up and these things like these videos, you can, like you say, pick up a lot. And I think we owe it to the kids to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In saying that, I know that whoever is watching an episode called Handover Hell, the last thing they're probably, thinking about is, that kind of stuff, because they've just got to deal with the whole intricacies and craziness of it. Perhaps there's family violence that you're dealing with. Perhaps, you've got a manipulative controlling, it's coercive control. There's all these factors that are involved for the parent and for the listener, for you today. So, Mum, how can people arrange their handovers so it's good for them as well as their kids? Are there things, we'll just bring this one up straight away, because we know some people were doing handovers in their house. So the other parent would come into the house and they'd get the kids' stuff and take them out, which is great if you're amicable, but some people aren't amicable, and having your ex walk into your house is not great for your mental health. So how can people make it better for them as well as the children?
As well for the kids. I think the main thing that the courts look at is limit the number of changeovers so that time with the other parent is in blocks. And so that's, if it's five, let's say 5 nights a fortnight, try to have those 5 days in a block. So it's one changeover on the first and one changeover on the other. Another way of doing it is the school thing where you drop them off and it's a normal drop off for the kids, and then their dad picks them up or their mum picks them up, and there's none of the parents together. You have to protect yourself. And if you're coming from a manipulative and controlling relationship or coercive control, you have to be careful that you're not sort of bending over backwards to not appear stressed or worried for your child. And the other person can't resist having a go at you, being sarcastic, filming you at changeover. So it does take 2 people to make this changeovers easy. So for those people who are listening to this, I suspect you are trying to put the kids first. You're putting yourself through it so the kids can see the other parent, but it is disappointing if the other parent simply doesn't have the same point of view. Maybe you can recommend they do a parenting course. But so I think that the way that a lot of people did it, though, is have it not so obvious, have it somewhere where the kids are happy, and it might be that you drop the kids off at the other parent's place or something like that.
Like, there always should probably be the ones taking the kids should be the ones picking the kids up and from your house if it's safe. That way, don't turn up, the kids are none the wise. I do find it upsetting for people that they find that their ex is creeping back into their world through this. We've done an episode on what to do with their stuff, and it's the same thing, that ex keeps wanting to come in. So my best tip for anybody who's trying to make this better for themselves with a manipulative controlling or a high conflict or even an avoidant, and it's just too stressful for you, consider making sure that the handovers need the least amount of communication beforehand. So if it's like, you know exactly when handover is, exactly how and exactly when and where and how, and you don't need to message them to ask them anything in advance, it is going to take a little bit of the stress away and a little bit of that control that they may have over you, where you've got to wait for them to respond before you can do anything. Make sure whatever you choose doesn't have that involved in the picture.
Yeah. And that's why I never liked the idea of a parent coming into the other parent's house post-separation. So it's really about setting new boundaries. And, of course, if you've been in a manipulative relationship, boundaries are just the very thing that with you have been beaten down, and with the other person is not used to having to respect boundaries. So it's a kind of business-like approach to say, this is my place. And it's really hard if you're still in the family home, and then the other person says, it's still my home, I'm on the mortgage, I own half. It's a bit easier if you're renting somewhere and you just have that clear rule, they don't come in. So it's boundaries, it's healthy boundaries.
What are the biggest mistakes you've seen happen, and what do you want to warn people not to do?
Need to start doing your disclosure but have no idea where to start? Feeling overwhelmed about mediation coming up? or just trying to deal with negotiating with a manipulative ex, then you need to go to thedivorcecourse.com.au to go to the free resources section where you can get a mediation checklist, a disclosure checklist, a word salad, read a letter like a pro checklist, and also a before you go checklist. Get ahead of the game and be organised and ready, as this handy checklist, along with the accompanying episodes of the podcast, will be perfect for you. All you need to do is go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free resource section and download the free checklists today.
What are the biggest mistakes you've seen happen, and what do you want to warn people not to do?
I think big, long, lingering handovers are inviting trouble. If you've got a court order or you want the children to go to this other person, don't make it a long goodbye. Be matter of fact, give them a kiss, tell them you love them, help them with their bags and say, all right, I'll see you on Wednesday or whatever it is. And just really be kind of matter of fact. So the mistake, if you go, oh, come back and give me one more hug, or following them over to the car, or it's just two things wrong with that. One is it's stressful on the child. And if you're upset, they're upset. Oh no, why is daddy upset? Why is mummy upset? And the other thing is that it allows an opportunity, too long an opportunity, for a dispute to break out between you both. And in particularly with little children, they may not cope with the transfer. The little ones might change their mind about going if the mother hangs around or the father hangs around too long.
Are there any other no-nos for handovers? What about filming? You mentioned that before.
Oh, my goodness, yes. Filming or taking too many people with you. You could have both parties filming each other, which is shocking, or one person filming another, because the child's looking at that, no, why is mummy taking video of this, or why is daddy doing that? That's bizarre. And I've seen people lodge that as evidence in their cases, and the judges really criticise both parents. The person who did whatever it was that needed to be filmed, so bad that it could form evidence for the other person, but also for the parent who was filming and just making it weird for the kids. So filming is a big mistake.
Obviously, get your own independent legal advice for all of this. Mum's just giving you some general tips and education, because each situation is different. Of course, if they're doing something completely outrageous, then I've heard some horror stories where they deliberately do things to upset people at Handover, like not strapping a baby up in a car seat, or driving at 100 miles an hour when they leave, doing burnout.
Film away.
Yeah. What if someone turns up to a handover and they're drunk, or they don't have a car seat, or what can they do there?
Well, here, with all the disclaimers we've ever said, right, that this is general education only, and it's get your own legal advice, because what I'm about to say is very controversial, but I don't think it should be. I think when you breach a court order, that's a very serious thing to do. But if you breach an order for a child to go with a parent and you had a good reason, it was reasonable to refuse to send them, then yes, you've still contravened an order, but you had a reasonable excuse. So I think you've got to go with your gut. Why would you hand over a child to someone who was drunk? You go, no. You might film a little bit of the staggering, and then you can expect maybe a contravention application against you. You might be found to have contravened because you haven't handed the child over when you were required to, and you have to prove that you had a reasonable excuse. So that would be a good opportunity for filming. And dash cams and rear cams will pick up stuff as well, and CCTV footage in areas will as well. But the court says nothing in the act is meant to put the children or you in a difficult position or exposed to family violence, and driving off over speed with your children in the car. That is family violence as far as I'm concerned, because it's a threat of harm to those children. So I think we have to be strong. And if you really think the children shouldn't go because of something like that, then don't send them, and just say, look, I'm drunk, I'm not sending them.
So again, this is mum's opinion, and weirdly enough, that unfortunately is not the opinion. They do really want you to follow court orders because they are law. The law.
That's right. So there's that tension.
Yeah, and you're breaking a law if you don't follow that. But go with see a lawyer, get some legal advice to make sensible decisions.
Yeah, you're there at that moment. And I do remember being before a certain judge up here where I had actually advised my client, knowing all the circumstances, to not send the children to the other parent. And the judge said, "That's very brave of you, Mrs. Galvin." And I said, my client has reasonable excuse, Your Honour. And he did find it was a reasonable excuse ultimately. Because the tension for the courts is they can make these rules and they're anticipating, if you've had to get a court order, they're anticipating that there is some reluctance to hand the kids over, right? So you're already a bit behind the ball at that point. But the court isn't there at changeover, where a judge might go, "Holy heck, that person's so drunk or they're on drugs. Don't you send the kids?" That would be, they're not there.
Yeah. And again, go and see a lawyer. This is not mum telling you not to do it. Go and see a lawyer and get legal advice. Now, Mum, the other question is, I want a couple of what ifs, and and I know you can't actually give legal advice to anybody listening to this, but
this is just a frequently asked question. Yep.
Yeah. So what if handover was meant to be at school, but the ex is running late, the co-parent wants to pick them up at 11 o'clock midnight instead, and it's their day? What happens if you've got orders and they keep changing things, or you've got parenting plans and they keep changing things? What happens then?
Well, the orders will be termed in terms of that the children will spend time with the father or the mother at this particular date and from this time. And if you had the kids ready and available and the other person didn't come and get them, then they are also in breach of the court order because they were not availing themselves of the opportunity to spend time with the children. So you don't want to be weird about it or really nasty. So that scenario might not wash if they were just at a girlfriend's place or at a pub or something. But if there's been an emergency in the family, they've had to do something with one of their parents, then you might think that was reasonable. When you do withhold kids, I should have said this before, but when you do withhold kids, the court also looks to make sure that if you have withheld them, it's only to the extent and for as long as is absolutely necessary to protect their safety. So if in that situation when it's 11 o'clock at night and they say, you should probably say, how about in the morning, come and collect them in the morning, they're in bed now, whatever, that sort of thing. So if the person has been maybe hitting the kids and you're worried about safety, then you might offer in the interim some supervised time. So, or phone or video links or Zooms or whatever it is so the kids can still have the contact with the other parent without being at risk themselves. Give me another, for example.
Says to you, "Look, I can't come over. Can you please drop the kids over to my house?" And we do hear this clashing of timetables and the manipulative and controlling ex who was like, sits there thinking up things, I think, because we hear a lot of these from our members, thinking of these really complicated ways to really just get you in trap, like the narcissistic type. Yeah. So what if they say, "Oh, look, I cannot come. I've got some other reason why, some ridiculously lame reason. Can you please drop the kids off at my house instead?" And they do this to the person every week or every handover. It's always a different thing. It's always a drama. Yeah. What do you do with that?
Well, when you look back over it, you can see it as a pattern, but in the moment, you don't always see it as a pattern. Sometimes people who do that, the people who are saying, "Oh, no, I didn't come and bring them over now," or "I'll come and get them now," they really have a problem with being told what to do. A real problem with authority, and a court order is just another thing telling them what to do. And so they instinctively buck against that system. I think the status you being to go on is important. In other words, nip it in the bud early. When I was an article clerk, my old boss, he was an old man when I was 30, so his version of what happened in marriages where one party behaves terribly after separation, his view is that the other parent spoilt that person by giving in to them all the time. And then when they've separated, they want that again. And there was no understanding of coercive control. I always knew my clients were lovely. And you think, "Oh, that's why they didn't make a fuss. It was peace at any price. They are stronger inside and it really mattered to the other person." So it's hard to pull yourself out of that and put your boundaries in place. But think about it. You're really training yourself and them to respect those boundaries. if it happens once, you might say, look, I'll do it this once, no more. If you don't pick them up, then the kids need certainty. I need to get on with my day. It's not happening.
Now, this is the clanger, and this one asked pretty much once a week on our Instagram, on our Facebook, on our TikTok, and via email. So
and our Q&As. Yeah.
Definitely on the Q&As. What if at the handover, the child doesn't want to go?
Oh, my gosh.
So sorry to put you in that one, Mum, because I know that's a really hard one to answer.
It's a really hard one.
What are parents supposed to do? And I know there's a million different myriad of solutions and reasons why, but what happens in those situations? What have you seen happen? And can you give any tips and words of legal education to people going through that?
Yeah. My worst one I remember was where the child would hang on to the rail of the stairs and vomit while the other person was pulling them by the legs to take them in. You would think someone who saw their child in that extreme distress would just go, oh, no, I'm sorry, I won't. Why don't we just sit down here and we'll have a cup of tea or whatever. So if your child doesn't want to go and they're little enough, you just basically put them in. And it comes down to your preparation. There's two aspects, your preparation of the children for their going over, but the other person has to not be weird, it has to be not make the kids feel bad, not make the changeover feel bad. So there's that double role, and that post-separation parenting courses help you understand that. But if a child has a really strong desire to not go, then something's happening in someone's house that's making that happen, because mostly kids, if they're prepared properly, it's like the first day of school. Some kids cry, some kids don't, but they all get into the swing of it. And you can't really just keep forcing them. If the kids are getting older and they're able to say why, you might say, look, reach out to the other parent and say, can we have a counselling? These kids are refusing to go or don't want to go. What is it about can you not have spicy food or whatever it is that they're objecting to? Yeah. And then once the kids are about 12, 13 and upwards, what they say pretty well goes in the court's eyes. It's definitely, I'd say by 14, 15, the children are old enough to express their wishes clearly, not be tricked by the other parent. They're making the decisions from their lived experience, and they vote with their feet. The court seldom makes orders about kids, say 15 and older. And by the time they're 18, technically the Family Law Act applies until these kids are 18. But anyone with older teenagers knows they're their own people from about 16 on. I mean, I worked full time when I was 15 and I knew everything.
Yeah, something. So you do really need to have handover specified and locked down. What are the different types of handover that people can do, Mum? Because I didn't realise there were so many different options of handovers. Well, I knew way more at 15 than I do now. So, yeah I can see. So that is an incredibly massive minefield of hell at a handover that we haven't even touched the surface of, and may not ever, because we don't want to get in any trouble. But I think it's important to note is there are people that are going through that. We have many dealing with that at the moment.
I think it takes one fool parent to make the whole thing terrible. I think the next thing to do is get a family report to put these kids' wishes front and centre, and then you've got something to rely on if you're changing the orders or asking to change the orders.
And I think family report is one way to get the kids' opinion out there. Children's wishes reports and independent children's lawyers, they now speak to the children, don't they?
They do. It's compulsory for them unless there's some really good reason, as long as the kid's older than 5. And that informs them a little bit. They're not actually advocating what the children's wishes are, but they are able to tell the court what the children's wishes are and what they've said. So, I'll see how that goes. It's a new amendment came out in May, and prior to that, there were some people who met with the kids. Yeah, but we'll see how that goes.
I'll pop in our episodes that talk about family reports. And I'll also pop in the episode in the show notes that is Help, My Ex Won't Let Me See the Kids. The other way where it's flipped and the kids don't want to come for you.
Can I just say a big caveat, a big warning here, and I've said it before and I'm saying it again. Don't go down the parenting coordinator path at all. If there's an issue, it's not the kid's issue, it's one of the parents. And if it's not you, and you don't, therefore the kids are, it can't be you that the kids are rebelling against. It's the other parent. Why would you put them through a parenting coordinator? Why would you submit to that? So it's not a legal thing I'm saying here, but I just don't see any point in it. It's kind of can be used for post-separation abuse. And then you have parenting coordinators writing reports and it just muddies the waters.
So we've done a whole episode on why your narcissistic ex may want you to have a parenting coordinator. I'll put that link in the show notes. If anyone's listening and they like to learn more about the particular cases, Mum actually does Cases Explained on our Patreon account, and you can watch videos of her explaining different cases and they may be relevant to your situation. And so if you are interested in that, go and check out Patreon and you can listen to Mum talking about Cases Explained. So I'm going to leave it at that, Mum.
Okay.
I know it's going over time. You did say it was to take an hour and I said, no, it won't. And it has. Just want to quickly touch on amicable, obviously. What's something they need to know about locking in handovers?
Yeah, you've got to lock it in, Eddie, as they say. Get it in writing. Put it down, even if it's just casual writing, and sign it. So you've got a parenting plan, and that's something that each of you lives by, can show other people, and it's the least expensive way. Just write it out, both sign it, put a date, it's done.
And that's because amicable doesn't always stay amicable. So keep that in mind.
It's kind of, it's kind of we're friends, but something may happen.
Number 2 is avoidant mum. For those people that they don't want to sit down and lock in a parenting plan. They don't want a consent order. They don't want rules. They just want to live by their thing. Mm-hmm. They'll come get the kids when they want to come get the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to talk about it. What do we do for avoidance?
What you have to do is start as you mean to go on. And if they're not wanting to cooperate in designing a parenting arrangement, send them one. Say, look, I've been thinking, and this is what I think could happen. If I don't hear from you in 7 days, I'll assume you're happy with this and we'll go with this routine. And you've sent that, you've put emailed it from your email address. They may not respond, which means that meant they obviously didn't have a problem with it. Or they might respond with some changes, which is fine because you've got them negotiating a parenting plan.
Good job. And I think the other thing that you've mentioned with avoidant mum is if they don't want to lock anything in, which I think is also sometimes a bit manipulative and controlling, to document the handovers so that you've got evidence, even though there's no parenting plan in place and you don't have consent orders or court order, you can have proof that handover pretty much goes like this every couple of days. So if you need it, you can prove it by sending them an email saying, hey, just confirming blah, or just writing a diary note, I picked the kids up at this time. Yeah. Yes.
I think there's something to be said for the email or text because it's documented in writing, and no response usually means that they've agreed. So it's it's a good way if you're really stuck with someone who doesn't want to get into it.
But go and see a lawyer. Always go see a lawyer. It's a great idea. Next one is manipulative and controlling mum. When it comes to handover hell, what do they need to really have front of mind for manipulative controlling with handovers?
I think if you've got a manipulative and controlling ex, I think that they're going to try to do that with the children. You are going to have a lot more problems than I think any of the other groups. High conflict settles down after a while, but a control thing lasts for ages, and it can be through the children. And where you might want to use that grey rock method and have nothing to do with them, or you can't do that when there's kids. So there's always that little area where they can niggle and carry on. I don't know. I think most of this session has been about when you've got manipulative and controlling people. I think we could do another hour on that as well. It's just so hard.
I think really looking at the loopholes and making sure your wording is ironclad and all the what ifs and the future proofing, because that's the loopholes is where the controlling people seem to, from what we've heard from members, come in and really advance. Yeah.
They must scour through and find something that isn't mentioned. So sometimes with those sort of people, you need incredibly detailed orders with every contingency. And that means you're going to need to see a lawyer. Make sure that you haven't missed anything.
I have seen some of our members talk about this clause where it's any other thing that is not mentioned for handover, the handover will be at this.
Yes.
So saves any argument, because if they go, I don't know, maybe school finished because, I don't know, another example, like something like COVID, or school finished because of this, and you got to do a handover, but it's not mentioned in the orders. So they go, oh, well, I'm not going to do it. But if you've got any other time that the handover should occur when it's not blah, 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 it should occur here. So that covers butts. So
time and place. That's right. And it covers the situation where the other parent wants to pick them up at 11 o'clock at night. If you put in a clause, something like that, if it doesn't take place, then the changeover is the next day.
That's great. And I guess when we go into high conflict, I think you've just already hit the nail on the head. Be really specific with time and place. I have seen some members who have, parenting plans that don't have time. They have when, but they don't have time. So even with school, if it's a school handover, sometimes school doesn't happen on those days. So what time and do you still pick them up at school, or so really be specific.
What ifs. And that's why a lawyer's good, Laura, because we've been dealing with what ifs for, years and years and years. And most of those things we can think of that might happen.
Are interested, from time to time, we open enrollments to our DIY Divorce Blueprint, where we actually talk you through step by step how to write your own parenting plan, and also how to create your own consent orders, get them signed, go to mediation, and get it all organized and get it filed in the court so that you have these locked in place. So if you are interested in that, we do webinars where we talk about the processes and the steps. And you can sign up to become a member and do our online course, as well as come along to our member Q&As and be a part of our community. So if you're interested, shoot us an email at thedivorcecourspodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, thedivorcecourse.com.au. So that was a huge topic, and I'm really sorry, Mum. I thought it would be really quick. And I feel like we've just literally just taken the skin off the outside and we haven't even got to the bits. So I know everyone who emails us, and I'd love to hear from you if you have listened to this and we have not thought about something. Maybe we'll do a part 2, because I know it's a stressful time, because the last thing you want is your children to be upset, hurt, sad, put out of time. There's so many things emotionally involved in a handover for you and your children that we really want to support you and help you get through it. And Mum, you've seen everything happen in these situations, so you know how emotional it can be. So if that is you're watching this and you're pulling your hair out, please take care of yourself. Please go see a lawyer. If you can't afford one, there's community legal services. You can go and just get some advice and make it better for you and your children.
Yeah, because the kids from where I sit at my age, and you're my daughter and you're not my eldest daughter, all of the children do grow up and become adults. And their childhood is a small, short and precious stage of their lives for you and for them. And it'd be a shame if a drawn out argument was to put an awful sort of stain on those childhood years. And when children are doing frequent changeovers, they, like you said, Rose, they spend a couple of days stressed thinking about it, then it happens, and then they play up for the next day. Weekend time, I always say to my clients, they're going to play up till Wednesday probably. Expect it. Things. So, we're doing what we can, hey, Laura, to try and support everyone through so the kids don't go through so much. Yeah. And I'm very happy to say that the family court seems to have taken that approach as well.
And if you're watching this, you are also trying to make a difference. So, good for you. Wow. And we'll get better. So thank you, Mum, for your time. And thank you, listeners, for watching today and listening today. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, Mum.
Bye, Laura. Bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording